This wife had the perfect life. Until she discovered her billionaire husband's one secret night with his mother. What she learned next would tear their world apart. If you're ready for a story that will shock you, hit subscribe now. Because what happens next, you won't believe. If happiness had an address, it would be 1 Aurora Drive, the sprawling, sun-drenched estate of the Montgomery family. It wasn't just a house. It was a living, breathing testament to a perfect life. And at the very center of this universe was Liam Montgomery. Liam wasn't just wealthy. He was the kind of billionaire who made fortune seem romantic. He hadn't inherited his wealth. He had built his tech empire, Ether Innovations, from a college dorm room into a global titan. At 35, he had the world at his feet, but his eyes only ever held a true, unguarded softness for 2 people. His wife, Elara, and his daughter, Lily. Elara was his sun. A brilliant graphic designer in her own right, she was the vibrant color to his structured lines. She had refused to be just a billionaire's wife, maintaining her own identity and career, a fact Liam adored her for. Their love story was the stuff of modern fairy tales. A chance meeting at a tech gala where she, unimpressed by his title, had debated the aesthetics of his company's logo with a fiery passion that left him utterly captivated. Their home was filled with laughter, the kind of deep belly laughs that echoed through the high ceilings. Mornings were a chaotic, joyful ritual of making pancakes with Lily, who at 4 years old, was a whirlwind of curls and boundless curiosity. Evenings were for cozying up in their home theater, a giant bowl of popcorn between them as they watched animated films, Lily asleep between her parents. And then there was Eleanor. Eleanor Montgomery was the matriarch, a woman who carried herself with the grace of old Hollywood and the sharp intellect of a seasoned CEO. Many would expect a woman of her stature, the former head of the family's old money empire, to be cold or disapproving of her son's self-made path and his vibrant, middle-class wife. But Eleanor was Elara's most unexpected and cherished ally. From the moment Liam brought Elara home, Eleanor had embraced her. "Any woman who can make my stoic son laugh like that is a miracle worker," she had said, pulling Elara into a genuine lavender-scented hug. She became Elara's confidant, her guide through the treacherous waters of high society, and her most fervent defender. When Elara felt overwhelmed by the public scrutiny, it was Eleanor who would take her for spa days, whispering, "Hold your head high, my dear. You are the best thing that ever happened to him." When Lily was born, Eleanor was there, not to command, but to support, holding Elara's hand during a difficult delivery and later spoiling her granddaughter with a devotion that was pure and uncomplicated. Their bond was the envy of many. "You're so lucky your mother-in-law actually likes you," Elara's friends would sigh. And she was. Eleanor wasn't just tolerated. She was woven into the fabric of their happy life. She visited every Sunday for a family dinner, her presence a warm, steady constant. She never overstayed, never criticized, only ever added to their joy. This was their reality. A trinity of love between Liam, Elara, and Eleanor, with little Lily as their shining jewel. It was so perfect, so complete, that the single strange thread of dissonance seemed insignificant, a minor, unexplainable quirk in an otherwise masterpiece. That quirk was the 11th of every month. It was the one day Eleanor didn't just visit. She stayed over. The dinner on the 11th was always a more somber affair. The laughter was a little quieter, the conversations a little more restrained. Liam would be more pensive, his mind seemingly elsewhere. Elara had noticed it early on but had chalked it up to a family tradition. Perhaps the anniversary of a lost relative or a solemn family remembrance. When she had gently asked Liam about it once, he had given her a small, tight smile. "It's just something we do, my love. A private thing between me and my mother. It helps her. Don't worry your beautiful head about it." She had accepted it. In a life filled with so much transparent joy, one night of mild mystery was easy to overlook. She would kiss him good night, feel his arms wrap around her, and fall asleep feeling like the safest, most loved woman in the world. She never noticed that his embrace on those nights felt just a little bit tighter, almost desperate. She never saw the look that passed between mother and son as Eleanor retired to her guest suite, a look that wasn't of simple affection, but of a shared heavy burden. The happiness was real. The love was true. But it was built on a foundation that housed a dark, silent secret, one that slept peacefully in the deepest corner of their paradise, waiting for the one night it would be awakened. For 3 years, the 11th of the month was nothing more than a gentle, recurring ripple on the otherwise calm surface of their lives. Elara's initial, fleeting curiosity had been completely soothed by Liam's simple explanation and the overwhelming evidence of their happiness. It was their one peculiar family tradition, a small, quiet island in their sea of joy, and she respected it. But trust, once subtly pricked, can develop a slow, invisible leak. The change started not with a dramatic event, but with a collection of tiny, almost imperceptible details that, individually, meant nothing. Together, they began to form a faint, disquieting pattern. It began on a Tuesday, the 11th of October. Elara had woken, as she often did, to an empty bed. Assuming Liam was in the bathroom, she had rolled over, burying her face in his pillow. But minutes passed and he didn't return. A faint, cold dread, one she hadn't felt in years, whispered at the edge of her consciousness. She got up to get a glass of water. As she passed the grand staircase, she heard it. Not from the direction of the kitchen or his study, but from the far wing where the guest suites were located. It was the soft, distinct sound of a door clicking shut. The sound was so muted it was almost swallowed by the silence of the mansion. She stood frozen on the steps, listening. Nothing. Only the hum of the night. She shook her head, chiding herself for her foolishness. He was probably just checking on something, she thought, and went back to bed. The next morning, Liam was already at the breakfast table, dressed for work, reading the financial news on his tablet. Lily was chattering excitedly about her dream involving a flying pony. Everything was normal. Yet, when Elara kissed his cheek, she noticed the shadows under his eyes were darker than usual. His posture held a deeper weariness. "Rough night, my love?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. He looked up, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes seemed distant, guarded. Then the familiar warmth returned. "Just a lot on my mind with the Singapore merger," he said, reaching for her hand and squeezing it. "Nothing for you to worry about." She wanted to believe him. She did believe him. But the seed of doubt, tiny and insidious, had been planted. The following month, on the 11th of November, she decided to test the waters. She feigned a deep sleep as Liam carefully extricated himself from their bed. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed 11:58 p.m. She listened to his retreating footsteps, not heading towards their ensuite bathroom, but out of their bedroom door and into the hallway. Her heart began a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. He's just going to his study. He's getting a snack. He's checking the security system. The rationalizations felt thinner this time, more transparent. She waited, counting the seconds in the oppressive quiet. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. The mansion was a tomb. Driven by an impulse she couldn't control, she slipped out of bed and crept to their bedroom door, opening it just a crack. The hallway was empty, bathed in the soft glow of night lights. From the direction of the guest wing, she heard it again, the same soft, mournful sound she would later recognize as weeping. It was so faint, so utterly desolate, that it made her blood run cold. It was Eleanor, and she was crying as if her heart were breaking. Before she could process it, she heard Liam's voice, a low, soothing murmur, though she couldn't make out the words. The tone was one of comfort, but it was layered with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Elara quickly closed the door, her back pressed against it, her breath coming in shallow gasps. What kind of grief required a monthly midnight vigil? Why was it a secret? The questions swarmed in her mind, ugly and persistent. The perfect image of her mother-in-law, the strong, composed, loving Eleanor, cracked. What darkness was hidden beneath that elegant facade? The next day, she tried to broach the subject with Eleanor herself. They were in the sunroom, watching Lily play in the garden. Elara began, choosing her words carefully. Is everything all right? Last night, I thought I heard something. It sounded like you were upset. Eleanor's smile was immediate, but for the first time since Elara had known her, it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a flicker of something. Panic? Fear? Before it was masked by her usual grace. Oh, my dear Elara, she said, patting Elara's hand. You are too kind. It's nothing. Just an old woman's foolish sentimentality. Some memories are just heavier at night. Please don't trouble yourself on my account. The dismissal was gentle, but it was a dismissal all the same. The door to the mystery was firmly closed in her face. The love and trust she felt for both of them warred with a growing, gnawing suspicion. The foundation of her perfect life was developing a hairline fracture. By the time the 11th of December arrived, the air in the Montgomery estate was thick with an unspoken tension. Elara could feel it. Liam was more withdrawn than usual during dinner. His answers clipped. Eleanor, while still the picture of poise, seemed paler, her hands trembling slightly as she sipped her wine. That night, Elara didn't even try to sleep. She lay perfectly still beside Liam, every sense on high alert. When he finally slipped out of bed at midnight, her eyes were wide open, staring into the darkness. She heard his footsteps, purposeful and direct, heading straight down the hall toward the guest wing. This time she didn't just listen. A cold, hard certainty settled in her stomach. The rationalizations were gone. The trust was frayed beyond repair. She needed to see. She needed to know what shadow was poisoning her paradise. She slid out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cool floor. She moved like a ghost through their bedroom, into the hallway. The mansion was eerily silent, holding its breath. As she moved closer to Eleanor's suite, the silence was broken. Not by weeping this time, but by something else. A rhythmic, creaking sound. A bed frame. And mixed with it, the same heartbreaking, mournful sobs from Eleanor. But now they were punctuated by something else. Low, strained grunts. Liam's voice. Elara's blood turned to ice. Her mind, desperate to protect her, offered a dozen innocent explanations, but her heart, her gut, knew. The sounds painted a picture so horrific, so vile, that her mind recoiled from it. She stood frozen outside the door, her hand hovering over the knob. The world she knew had already ended in that moment. Opening the door was just the confirmation. With a trembling hand, she turned the knob and pushed the door open. The scene inside was lit by a single dim bedside lamp, casting long, dancing shadows. It was a tableau from her deepest nightmare. Liam, her husband, the love of her life, was there with his mother. They were entangled in an intimate act, a grotesque parody of lovemaking. Eleanor's face was buried in a pillow, her body racked with sobs that were not of pleasure, but of utter, soul-crushing despair. Liam's face was a mask of grim determination, his jaw clenched, his movements mechanical, devoid of passion, filled only with a terrible, grim purpose. Elara's sharp, involuntary gasp sliced through the morbid rhythm of the room. Time stopped. Liam's head snapped up. His eyes, which moments before had been glazed with a kind of terrible focus, now widened in sheer, unadulterated panic. That panic quickly morphed into a flash of shame, and then solidified into a cold, hard fury that Elara had never seen in him before. It was the look of a cornered animal, a man whose deepest, darkest secret had been violently exposed. Eleanor let out a choked cry of horror, scrambling to cover herself, her weeping intensifying into hysterical, silent shakes. "Elara!" Liam's voice was a low, dangerous growl, so unlike his own it was terrifying. "Close the door." She stood there, paralyzed, her mind screaming, her body refusing to obey. "I said, close the door and get out," he roared, the sound echoing in the opulent room. "Why are you not sleeping?" The sheer audacity, the brutal command in his voice, broke her trance. Stunned, humiliated, and shattered, Elara stumbled backward, her vision blurring with tears. She pulled the heavy door shut with a soft, final click, the sound sealing her out of her old life forever. She leaned against the wall, sliding down to the cold floor, her body trembling uncontrollably. She expected the door to fly open, for Liam to come out, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But nothing happened. After a moment of dead silence, the horrifying rhythmic sounds from inside the room slowly started again. The mourning, the movement. They had been caught in the most unspeakable of acts, and his only concern was to see it through to the end. The truth was a monster, and it was not only real, but it was also not finished. It was still in that room, completing its vile ritual. And Elara was alone in the dark hallway, the ruins of her perfect life scattered around her, with no idea that the most shocking revelation, the why, was still to come. Elara didn't know how long she sat on the cold, hard floor of the hallway. It could have been seconds. It could have been an hour. Time had lost all meaning. The world had been reduced to the ornate pattern of the carpet beneath her trembling fingers and the terrifying, muffled sounds that finally, mercifully, ceased behind the door. The silence that followed was somehow more deafening, more horrifying. She heard movement inside. Soft footsteps, the rustle of sheets, a low, shuddering sob from Eleanor that was quickly quieted. Then, the firm, heavy tread of Liam's footsteps approaching the door. Elara scrambled to her feet, her body moving on pure instinct, a primal need to flee from the source of her pain. But her legs were weak, and she only managed to stumble a few feet down the hall before the door opened. Liam stood there, silhouetted in the dim light from the room. He had pulled on his silk pajama bottoms. His face was a ghastly mask, pale, strained, and etched with a shame so profound it seemed to physically weigh him down. But overriding the shame was a desperate, defiant anger. "Elara," he said, his voice hoarse. She stared at him, her eyes wide with a fresh wave of horror. The man standing before her was a stranger, the ghost of her husband, wearing his skin. What was that?" she whispered, the words tearing from her throat like shards of glass. "Liam, what did I just see?" "Go to our room," he commanded, his voice low but firm. "Now. We will not do this here." "Our room," she repeated, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her chest. "You think I can go back to our room? After that?" "Elara," he barked, the sound sharp and final in the sleeping house. He glanced nervously down the hall towards Lily's room, his expression pained. "Please. Not here. Not where Lily could." He couldn't finish the sentence. The mention of their daughter was a sobering slap. It was the one thread still connecting her to sanity. She nodded numbly, turning and walking on unsteady legs towards the master wing. She felt him following her, a predator at her back. Once inside their lavish bedroom, the room that had been their sanctuary, filled with love and whispered dreams, the facade crumbled. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, feeling violently ill. "Explain," she demanded, her voice trembling. "Explain to me how the man I love, how you could, with your own mother." Liam stood by the door, as if he didn't deserve to enter fully. He ran a hand over his face, looking older than she had ever seen him. "It's not what you think," he began, his voice hollow. "Don't!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at him. Don't you dare insult my intelligence. I have eyes, Liam. I know what I saw. It was sick. It was monstrous. It's a duty, he shouted back, his own composure breaking. A curse. A burden you could never understand. The words hung in the air between them, bizarre and unbelievable. A curse. Elara stammered, her mind reeling. What are you talking about? Just then, the bedroom door pushed open gently. Eleanor stood there, wrapped in a silk robe, her face ravaged by tears, her regal composure utterly destroyed. She looked frail, broken. Liam, don't, she pleaded, her voice a raw whisper. You cannot. The vow. The vow is what just shattered my wife's world, Mother. Liam shot back, his anger now directed at the source of his torment. She has seen the act. She deserves to know the reason. I will not lose her to this. This madness without a fight. Eleanor sagged against the doorframe, fresh tears streaming down her face. She gave a slow, defeated nod. Liam turned back to Elara, his eyes burning with a frantic intensity. You think we are monsters. I see it in your eyes. But we are prisoners, Elara. Prisoners of a bloodline, of a promise made generations ago that we cannot break. Just tell me, Elara whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed, her strength gone. Liam took a deep, shuddering breath. The Montgomery men. We are blessed with fortune, with power, with influence. But it is not a gift. It is a transaction. A deal made by my great-great-grandfather with something. A spirit. A force. The details are lost, but the consequence is not. He paused, gathering the horrific words. The fortune, the legacy, is tied to a ritual. A consummation of the bond between mother and son. It must be performed every month on the 11th, from the son's 20th birthday, until the mother's death. Elara stared, her mind refusing to process the archaic, supernatural horror of what he was saying. And if you don't? She asked, her voice barely audible. Liam's eyes met hers, filled with a terror that was all too real. If the ritual is not performed, he said, each word dropping like a stone, the son will not simply die. He will wither. A painful, agonizing decay that begins on his next birthday. A death so slow and so full of suffering that it is beyond comprehension. The room spun. A curse. A ritual. A choice between incest and a torturous death. It was insane. It was the stuff of Gothic nightmares, not their modern, rational life. You expect me to believe this? Elara choked out. You expect me to believe in some fairy tale curse? It's not a fairy tale, Elara. Eleanor cried out, her voice cracking. I watched it happen to my own brother. He refused the ritual when he turned 20. He called it blasphemy. By his 21st birthday, he was a skeleton, screaming in pain, his skin peeling from his bones. He begged for death for 3 months before it finally took him. The raw, visceral horror in Eleanor's voice was more convincing than any logical argument. This was not a lie. This was a lived, traumatic memory. Elara looked from Eleanor's devastated face to Liam's desperate one. The man she loved was trapped in a cycle of unimaginable horror with his mother, a cycle of mutual abuse and despair that had been forced upon them. They weren't monsters. They were victims of a darkness so profound it defied reason. The anger in her heart didn't vanish, but it was now tangled with a devastating, gut-wrenching pity. Liam took a step toward her, his hand outstretched, his eyes pleading. Now you know, Elara. Now you know the secret that has haunted me my entire life. The secret I carried so I could live, so I could build a life with you, so I could be a father to Lily. I did it all for you. For us. He was making her the reason. The weight of it was crushing. "And what about me, Liam?" she whispered, fresh tears finally falling. "Where do I fit into this? This ritual? What is my role in this nightmare?" Liam's face contorted in pain. He looked at his mother, then back at his wife. The silence in the room was heavier than any that had come before. Eleanor was the one who answered, her voice a ghost of a sound, filled with a new terrifying shame. "That is the part of the vow," she whispered. "That will shock everyone." The silence in the wake of Eleanor's words was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. Elara felt the walls of her beautiful bedroom closing in, the luxurious fabrics and soft lights now feeling like a mockery of the grotesque conversation unfolding within them. "What?" Elara's voice was a dry, broken thing. "What part of the vow?" Liam looked at his mother, a silent, tortured plea passing between them. It was clear Eleanor had spoken a part of the truth they had intended to keep buried forever. "Liam," Elara said, her voice gaining a sliver of steel despite the tremor underneath. "You said no more secrets. You said I deserved to know. So tell me, what role could I possibly have in this insanity?" Liam sank into an armchair by the window, his head in his hands. The powerful billionaire was gone, replaced by a boy trapped in a nightmare. When he looked up, his eyes were haunted. "The curse. It doesn't just affect me," he began, his voice hollow. "It's tied to the Montgomery bloodline, to the firstborn son. It was designed to perpetuate itself, to ensure the ritual is never broken." A cold dread, colder than anything she had felt yet, began to creep up Elara's spine. "What are you saying?" "The ritual my mother and I perform. It sustains the fortune and my life. But it does not break the cycle. It only maintains it." He took a shuddering breath. For the curse to be broken, for the chain to be severed, the energy, the burden, must be transferred. Transferred to who? Elara asked, though a part of her, a primal, horrified part, already knew the answer. Liam's gaze locked with hers, filled with an ocean of shame and despair. To the wife of the firstborn son. The world tilted. Elara's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. "The ritual," Liam continued, the words seeming to poison the air as he spoke them, "must evolve. Once the son takes a wife, the purity of the maternal bond is diluted. The ancient magic, the demon that holds our contract, requires a new anchor. A conduit of marital love to replace the conduit of maternal love." Eleanor let out a soft, broken sob, turning her face away. Elara stared, uncomprehending. "What does that mean?" "In plain words, Liam, what does it mean for me?" "It means," Eleanor whispered, her voice raw with a grief that spanned decades, "that to save Liam, to truly secure his life and the legacy, you must take my place." The words landed like a physical blow. Elara felt the air leave her lungs. "No," she breathed. "No, you're not saying." "The ritual," Liam forced out, his face ashen, "would become yours and mine, on the 11th of every month, starting on my next birthday." The horror was so complete, so utterly vile, that for a moment Elara's mind went blank, a pristine white shield against the unspeakable. Then, the reality crashed down upon her. He was asking her. Her husband was sitting there, telling her that to save his life, she would have to engage in a monthly ritualistic sexual act with him. An act that was now stripped of all love, all passion, all intimacy, and transformed into a grotesque supernatural transaction. An act that was currently shared between a mother and her son. She looked at Liam, the man whose touch had once set her soul on fire. The thought of his hands on her in that context, as a duty, a chore to ward off a curse, made her stomach heave. You want me." She couldn't even form the sentence. "I don't want this, Elara," he cried out, surging to his feet. "I have spent my entire life despising this. I lay with my mother not out of desire, but out of a terror you cannot fathom. The thought of dragging you into this hell, it has haunted me since the day I met you. It's why I never wanted to get married. But I fell in love with you. I was selfish. I thought I could have a piece of a normal life before you had to turn me into your mother?" Elara shrieked, the hysteria finally breaking through. "Before you had to make me a part of your twisted family ritual. It is the only way I get to live," he roared, his own control snapping. "Don't you understand? It is this, or I die a painful death. Is that what you want?" "Right now, I don't know," she screamed back, tears streaming down her face. "Maybe a clean death is better than this. This living damnation. For you. For me. For us." The silence that followed was explosive. Liam stared at her, wounded to his core. Eleanor finally stepped forward, her presence a sad, broken anchor in the storm. "There is more, Elara," she said, her voice trembling. "More?" Elara laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. "What more could there possibly be? What could be worse than this?" Eleanor's eyes, filled with a bottomless pity, drifted past Elara, towards the hallway, in the direction of their daughter's room. The simple, unconscious gesture was more terrifying than any shout. A new, even more profound horror dawned on Elara, so catastrophic it froze the blood in her veins. "Lily," she whispered. Liam closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path through his stubble. He gave a barely perceptible nod. "The curse passes to the firstborn child," Eleanor said, her voice barely audible. "Son or daughter. If the ritual is not performed by Liam, he will die. And if he dies before the curse is broken by the transfer to a wife, the curse lies dormant until Lily turns 20. The floor fell away from beneath Elara. She stumbled back, collapsing against the wall, her legs unable to hold her. No, not her baby. Not her bright, beautiful, innocent Lily. The vision Eleanor had painted of her brother's death, the withering, the screaming, the agonizing decay, now superimposed itself over her daughter's small, laughing face. The choice was no longer just about saving her husband. It was no longer about her own unimaginable sacrifice. It was about condemning her daughter to the same hell. It was about Lily, in 16 years, being forced to lie with her own father, with Liam, in a desperate, horrific bid to survive. The monstrous geometry of the curse was now fully revealed. It was a snake eating its own tail, generation after generation. A perfect, inescapable trap of blood and horror. Liam looked at her, his expression one of utter devastation. "Now you know it all," he whispered. "The full truth. I am trapped. We are all trapped. The only way out is through you." Elara slid all the way to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around herself. She was a boat adrift in a black, endless ocean of nightmare. Before her were two abysses. One was to participate in the unthinkable, to sacrifice her body and her sanity to save her husband. The other was to refuse, and in doing so, knowingly condemn her beloved daughter to a fate 1,000 times worse. There was no right answer. There was only suffering. She sat there on the cold floor of her gilded cage, as the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky outside. The night of the 11th was over. But for Elara, the darkness had just begun. The first rays of sunlight, usually a welcome sight that painted their room in hues of gold and pink, now felt like an interrogation lamp. They exposed the devastation in stark, unforgiving detail. The tear-streaked faces, the disheveled clothing, the profound exhaustion that clung to them all like a shroud. Elara remained on the floor, her body numb, her mind a swirling vortex of horror. The two choices presented to her played on a relentless, monstrous loop. Choice 1. Submit. On the 11th of every month, she would go to the guest room, or perhaps a special room would be designated a ritual chamber, and perform the act with Liam. It would not be making love. It would be a clinical, desperate transaction. She would look into the eyes of her husband and see not passion, but the same grim determination she had witnessed hours before. She would become a vessel, a tool for his survival. Their marriage, whatever was left of it, would be forever defined by this monthly degradation. The love she felt for him would be poisoned, slowly and irrevocably, replaced by resentment and a deep, psychic revulsion. But he would live, and Lily would be safe from the curse. Choice 2. Refuse. She could pack her bags, take Lily, and run. She could try to build a new life, far from the Montgomery name and its ancient darkness. She could try to forget, but she would be a widow to a living man. And every day, the clock would tick down towards Liam's 41st birthday, when the withering would begin. She would have to live with the knowledge that she had condemned the father of her child to an agonizing death. And worse, the specter of the curse would simply lie in wait, a sleeping monster inside her daughter, ready to awaken on her 20th birthday. Could she ever look at Lily without seeing that future? There was no victory, only varying degrees of damnation. Liam had not moved from the armchair. He watched her, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He looked like a man who had just been handed a death sentence and was watching his only possible appeal crumble to dust. Eleanor was the first to break the silence. She moved with a quiet dignity that seemed to cost her the last of her strength. She walked to the ensuite bathroom and returned with a glass of water, which she placed on the floor next to Elara. "Drink, my dear," she whispered, her voice raspy. "The shock. It dehydrates you." The simple, maternal act was so at odds with the horror they had just discussed that it shattered Elara's numbness. A fresh wave of tears, hot and silent, spilled down her cheeks. She looked up at the woman she had considered a friend, a mentor. "How?" Elara croaked. "How have you borne this? All these years?" Eleanor's face crumpled. "For the same reason you are considering it now. For my child." She glanced at Liam, her love for him a painful, visible thing amidst the ruin. A mother's love is a force that can make the unbearable bearable. It can make you walk through hell itself if it means your child is safe on the other side. You do not live with it. You endure it, one cursed night at a time. "And your husband?" Elara asked, the thought suddenly occurring to her. "Liam's father." "He never knew," Eleanor said softly. "He died in a car accident when Liam was young. It was a mercy in some ways. He was spared this knowledge. The burden falls only on the mother and the son. And now, the wife." The weight of the secret felt heavier than ever. Elara was now a keeper of this vile truth, a guardian of a nightmare. Liam finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "I will not force you, Elara. I could never. If you choose to leave, I will not stop you. I will sign over half of everything I own to you and Lily. You will never want for anything. You can disappear and I will spend whatever time I have left saying goodbye." His words were meant to be noble, but they felt like another form of manipulation. How could she leave him to that fate? How could she take his money, the money that was arguably bought with this very ritual, and run? "And what would I tell Lily?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. "When she asks why her daddy is gone? When she turns 20 and her body begins to fail her? What story would I tell her then? That I was too selfish, too weak to save you both?" "Don't say that," Liam begged, sliding from the chair to his knees before her. "You are not selfish. You are the strongest, most pure person I have ever known. This is not your burden to carry. I brought it to you. My bloodline brought it to you. But I married into it," she cried. "I said, for better or for worse. I just never imagined the worse would be this." The sound of a door opening down the hall made all three of them freeze. Small, padding footsteps. A sleepy, little girl voice. "Mommy. Daddy. Is it pancake day?" Lily stood in the doorway, her favorite teddy bear dangling from her hand, her hair a messy halo of curls. She blinked in the morning light, looking at the strange scene. Her mother on the floor, crying. Her father on his knees. Her grandmother standing by, looking more sad than she had ever seen her. In that instant, the abstract horror of the curse became terrifyingly concrete. It was this little girl. Her future. Her life. Liam was the first to react. He forced a smile onto his face, a masterpiece of acting that broke Elara's heart all over again. "Good morning, my little star," he said, his voice miraculously light. "It's not quite pancake day, but I think we can make an exception." He stood up, sweeping her into his arms, burying his face in her neck for a moment too long, as if drawing strength from her pure, untainted presence. Lily giggled, squirming in his grasp. "Yay. Grandma, you'll have pancakes too." Eleanor's smile was more fragile, but just as brave. "Of course, my darling." Lily looked over Liam's shoulder at Elara, still on the floor. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Elara wiped her tears hastily, her own smile feeling like a cracked mask. "I'm not crying, sweetheart. Mommy just has something in her eye." She pushed herself up, her legs shaky. Now, who wants chocolate chips in their pancakes? As Liam carried a chattering Lily out of the room towards the kitchen, followed by a stoic Eleanor, Elara was left alone. She looked around the bedroom, at the photos of their happy family, at the rumpled sheets of their marriage bed. The choice was no longer a theoretical debate in the dark. It was here in the bright, cruel light of day. It was in the sound of her daughter's laughter drifting up the stairs. She could run and save herself, but she would lose her husband and ultimately her daughter. Or she could stay and try to save them both, but in doing so, she would lose a part of her own soul forever. There, standing in the ruins of her paradise, Elara Montgomery began the painful, terrifying process of choosing her hell.